Dear students of Holy Cross Lakeview, the scholars of history, I welcome you once again to this lesson of History 241/1 History of East Africa from C1000 to Independence. My name is Muyanda Samuel, who is going to take you through this online teaching within this COVID pandemic era. Good afternoon to all, dear listeners. We are still proceeding with our Buganda Kingdom. Last lesson we had the factors that were responsible for the rise and expansion of Buganda. And if at all I can revisit our previous lesson, we cited factors like fertile soils that Buganda possessed, favorable climate in Buganda region, good roads, able leaders, natural defense barriers like Lake Victoria, strong army, royal bodyguards, Buganda being small in size, centralized system of administration, etc., etc. From that knowledge and experience of the previous lesson, I would like to draw your attention to the structure of Buganda Kingdom. By the structure of Buganda Kingdom, I try to mean the way of life of Buganda Kingdom or the Baganda. How were they organized? How was Buganda Kingdom organized? You need to be very careful when you are handling this question. When they stated that how was Buganda Kingdom organized, it is not so demanding. It depends on what you will start with, either economic or political. You can even mix up points if at all you want, as long as it is a fact that it was part of Buganda's setup. But take note of questions like, describe the political, social, and economic organization of Uganda. That question is closed-ended. They want political alone, social alone, economic alone. Because it may sound to be very funny when you say politically Buganda participated in trade. Trade is not under political. It is an economic affair. One says economically Buganda was headed by a king. That is under political, it is administration. So when they say, how was Buganda Kingdom organized? Describe the political, social, and economic organization of Uganda. How was Uganda Kingdom organized? It is open-ended. Describe the political, social, and economic organization of Uganda. It is closed-ended. It has limits. Handle political alone, social alone, and also economic. And marks are going to be allocated for political, for social, and economic. If you handle one, that question is halfway done. And the marks are going to be distributed. It may not necessarily be evenly, that 5-5-5. It depends on which section that has got many points. And for you as a candidate, you may not know which section has got very many. However, if you want to pass it high, write much. Don't give 5-5, but write many. So under political organization, we believe that Uganda had a highly centralized system of administration. By centralization, we refer to the fact that Kabaka was at the top, and below him, it was a chain of ministers. Now that Kabaka was at the top of the kingdom, Kabaka was the title, it was a title, not a name, title given to the king of Buganda. And this Kabaka of Buganda had all powers centered around him because he was the one to appoint chiefs. He was the one to promote them upon a good performance, and he would demote, and after demotion, consequently, would dismiss the chiefs at will, and he was unquestionable because people were not supposed to question the Kabaka. Kabaka's powers were hereditary, meaning that leadership passed on from him to his eldest son. Similarly, even in Buganda Kingdom, leadership had to be passed on from father to the son, eldest son. That brings out the gist of the matter that leadership in Buganda was hereditary. In leadership, Kabaka was assisted by 3 ministers. And the one who was next to the Kabaka was the Prime Minister, Katikkiro. Below the Katikkiro, we had the Chief Justice, Omulamuzi, the Treasurer, Omuwanika, who was in charge of the finances collected in Buganda Kingdom. Chief Justice took over the office of the judge. The Kingdom of Uganda was also subdivided into counties. The counties were the Saza, quite big. Then the Saza was subdivided into sub-counties, which we call Gombolola, parishes, Muluka, sub-parishes, Ebitongole, up to the village level, Ebyalo. Each of these were led by a chief who was appointed by the Kabaka. They did and state the role of these chiefs. They mobilized people for public works. Remember, in Buganda, long ago, people were mobilized through drumming as a tool of communication. The people who were in charge of villages would mobilize them to dig around the wells, roads, for the good of their community. The Baganda also possessed the Luchiko, and the Luchiko became the native parliament. It had to make laws, and consequently also the Luchiko advised the Kabaka. Kabaka possessed the royal bodyguards, the Abambo, whom I told you about when we were looking at factors that were responsible for the rise and growth of Buganda Kingdom. But much as they had the Abambowa, Buganda also possessed a strong army that was responsible for the wars of conquest, responsible for the expansion of the kingdom. In Buganda, we believe that these army men, or the strong army, were given guns. Now that Buganda had participated in trade with the Arabs, it was able to receive guns, which guns it gave to the army men. And Buganda came up with a strong army under its political organization. When we go through the social organization of Buganda, these are things that entails culture, values, customs, how they did things. Socially, Buganda was organized on clan basis, ebika. People belong to different clans, and for that matter, somebody of a clan, a different clan, of a given clan, could not marry somebody of that particular clan. It was not proper for people of Enchima clan, if you were a Kafero, to marry, to marry Nakafero because you belong to the same clan. That was equivalent to committing incest. Marriage in Buganda was polygamous. The Baganda married, or the Baganda men married more than one wife. It was polygamous because to them it was a tool of respect and also a basis of acquiring leadership positions in the kingdom. We see to it that in the Buganda kingdom, Kabaka was the head of all clans, Sabataka. This takes us back to our first subtopic on origin of Buganda kingdom, where we say that when Chintu came from the directions of Mountain Elgon, he came with 13 to 14 clans, Upon reaching Buganda, he crowned himself as the head of the existing 5 to 6 clan heads, Sabataka. So Kabaka was the head of all clans in Buganda, and for him, as the Kabaka, he belonged to the clan of his mother. Baganda were also divided into classes. We had the royal class of men, the Balangira, and also that was a class of royals, the Balangira and the Bambejja. We had the class of the nobles, the Bakungu, and also the commoners who were known as the peasants, but don't forget the Bakopi, the slaves, Abaddu, who were there to work for the Balangira, to work for the Bambejja. Actually, it is important also to note that the Balangira and the Bambejja enjoyed from the sweat of the slaves, of the Bakopi, of the Baddu, because for them, they could not do any work. They were worked for. In Buganda, the Kabaka was the spiritual leader because he possessed semi-divine powers. He was both a political head and a spiritual head in the kingdom. All religious functions were presided over by the Kabaka. The Baganda believed also in their supreme being, Katonda, the creator, because they believed that Katonda was the one who created each and everything. But below Katonda, the Baganda believed that there were other lesser gods, or the smaller gods, the Lubali. And these Lubalis were consulted on various occasions in case of something. It depended on the demand. For instance, they had Dungu, who was responsible for hunting, or god for hunters. Musoke was the god for rain. That's why when you see the rainbow, if it is threatening to rain and you see the rainbow, you say, Musoke is in charge of the rain, can command it to rain or not. Mukasa was the god for the lakes. For those fishermen who had gone for fishing, Mukasa was their god. Walumbe was the god for death. They had Nagawonye. Nagawonye was for drought. Baganda also believed in witchcraft and sorcerers, whom they consulted because they believed that they possessed some other powers for harming others, or that could cause harm to others. The Baganda had royal regalias. These were symbols of leadership. Royal regalias like Baka cloth. You take note of the spelling. It is B-A-R-K, Bak. Should you write a word that alternates the meaning, we shall cross. Baka cloth, royal drum, royal spear, royal fire, royal stool. Those were royal regalias that the Kabaka possessed. Virginity was highly respected in Uganda because it was a sign of good upbringing and respect. And for that matter, when it came to marriage, a virgin girl fetched more bride price to the parents than the one who was not virgin. And it also gave respect to the family where that girl was coming from. When we switch on to the economic organization of Buganda Kingdom, we believe that here we are talking about what Buganda dealt in order to raise revenue. Buganda carried out agriculture as the major activity. And here you cite even the crops Buganda grew. Crops like matoke, cassava, yams, beans. Remember that Buganda was in that interlacustrine region. It possessed fertile soils, so it exploited the fertile soils, grew crops, which sustained the big population. They also kept some animals. You mentioned the types of animals, examples like cows, sheep, goats, and even birds. Trade dealt in poultry. Fishing was an economic activity among the Baganda. mere fact that they were located on the shores of Lake Victoria. Iron working, I told you, areas of Kochi and Buddu produced iron and even bugger cloth. So they did an economic activity of iron working, smelted iron, made knives, pangas, and spears. Buganda also participated in long distance trade with the coastal Arabs, and this enabled Buganda to acquire guns in exchange for the slaves and ivory. We recall that slaves were there, abakopi. The slaves who did the wooddu in Buganda, because these were taken as abaddu, were also slave artisans. So these slaves were exchanged because Arabs needed them to go and work on their plantations. Buganda received tributes from her vassal states. You give states like Busoga. These are states that paid tributes to Buganda, states like Itolo, and Buganda managed to attain revenue. Taxation was also done because Buganda levied tax on some of the goods that were traded within Buganda, and also taxed those people who moved into Buganda, who used their good roads, who had come for some trade items. Don't forget the fact that Buganda also waged wars of conquest on the neighbors. But before that, there were raids. It raided the neighboring societies like Busoga, Bunyolo, and it managed to acquire some of the items like ivory, slaves, cattle. This gave her enough revenue. Dear listeners,